Well, Greg, welcome to Unusual Attitudes. We're here again, together. You and I spent some time together. The first time we're actually talking in this format,
Right,
and we're
right.
in a pretty cool place to be able to do it on the campus of MIT as part of our customer advisory, which you've been a part of since the beginning. So I thank you for coming
Yeah.
and being here. But my first question for you, my only real question, is who is Greg Muccio?
It's a great question. I think it's, you know, as we were talking before the camera went on, depending on what part of your life that answer to that question might have been very, very different. But what I believe I have evolved to is a hopefully a good husband and a good father, but also a creative, innovative servant leader who has in the later half of my career learned to not quit, and I think that's a very big theme that I am live my life about right now.
So there must have been a point in your life when quitting was the biggest option on the table, or like tell me about that, like a moment in your life where you did quit, because clearly you've thought about this.
Yeah, yeah. Early in my career, I got into, I started out in sales and had gotten laid off and just got into a really bad situation with myself there of just not getting into the anger, the resentment, that piece of that to the part of where it really my search for a new role just didn't materialize very well, and it was just easy to kind of almost quit looking and that kind of thing, and just kind of sit into that that phase of just being upset, right? And in that particular piece, and for a good stretch of my life, it really that decision to not do that impacted me negatively even once I had moved out of it, because bills come due for real, right? And so to have to work my way through that at some point in time, manage myself out of debt and all those kind of things, and just keeping the at the time of that being a barrier for what could be a better, happier life, perhaps.
So when you're is have you ever put yourself in a situation where you knew quitting was very likely, but did so because you knew what you'd learn in that experience would help you grow? And I'll give you an example, and it's not that looking to mirror the example, but I've lived by that motto for a
Yeah.
really long time. Like, and it's sort of quitting is not an option, failure is not an
Right.
option. But it really is. It really is an option, and sometimes it's actually a very viable
Yeah.
option. And the story that I tell is the very first real company I started. I started a company when I was like 19. That was, and I don't say it's real because I didn't really know what I was doing. Right? Not like we watched some student venture,
Right.
entrepreneurs earlier today here at MIT, and you and I are both like, well, if I was doing that when I was 20,
Right.
and you did made a really funny comment, like you're worried about your fly being down and your shoelace is being tied.
Right.
And these kids are worrying about solving for Lyme disease and carbon emissions. Like
Right, yeah.
it's unbelievable. But there was a time in my life when I started my first real company, first software company. I had a very good job, and I walked into, I was a creative director for a big agency in Philly, doing very, very well. I could have been there forever. And I walked into the owner's office when it was supposed to be my sort of yearly review, performance review, whatever. And I probably would have gotten some level of a raise and a bonus and things like that. And it wasn't really about the money. It was about controlling my own destiny. And I walked in and I quit. And I'd made that decision the night before. And I hadn't thought about
Yeah.
it. 48 hours, I wasn't thinking about quitting at all. But what changed for me was I bought a house. I was married at the time,
Yeah.
and I bought my first house. And I decided I couldn't do this anymore. And I don't know what it was, but I couldn't be on the hamster wheel of working for someone else anymore, controlling my destiny and just making enough money to make that monthly payment. So while it was about money in the sense that I felt like there's a bigger opportunity, I also felt like at that point for me, quitting was my only option, because if I didn't do it then, I would be 30, then 40, and now 50, but I would get older, and it becomes so much harder to execute on those desires and dreams, those what ifs. What if I do something different? So for you, when you talk about, don't quit, it's probably not in that same context, but were there contexts where it was, I'm going to put myself in a very difficult situation where quitting is a very real outcome, but I need to because of the pressure to succeed?
Yeah, I think I've learned this a little bit, a piece of this, part later, but I love, I got to hear Lou Holtz speak one time, and who's just awesome. And that's, it's the fastest hour that you'll ever have of your life, and wish that it could double down. But he made a comment, or had said something. He was talking, and obviously talking about players and athletes on teams, and where that kind of piece came from, but said, quitting is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And that really resonated with me now to this conversation. It could be more, but I think that's a filter that you have to be able to run that through, right? So that it's not emotional. It's not this, the day will be there. As I mentioned, for a variety of reasons, when I graduated college, I thought I was meant to be a sales rep, because my father had been a sales rep, and both my brothers were in sales, and just thought it was that. And so I'm in year, 6, 7 in, my fourth different sales job, if you will. Happened to be fortunate that I was at a staffing company, and just finally came to the realization that was not for me. I didn't enjoy it. I wasn't really good at it either. And so that's just a horrible formula for long-term success, kind of to your point. And so it was, okay, how long do I keep going down this path? And one of the things, and I actually talk to many of folks that work for me now when we're talking through different roles, is, start thinking 2 roles ahead. Because if where you're at or what you're looking to do doesn't help you get to where you want to be, then there's a good chance you're wasting your time, right? So that's the opportunity to redirect that. And so as I was having those feelings, just had some good conversations, and my boss was like, hey, what if we taught you recruiting and you did this piece of it because we think you could be really good here? Okay, well, what I do now. So I mean, I'm now, the head of TA at a really awesome company, and that's kind of where that journey. Had I not pivoted right at that moment in time, had I not quit trying to be a sales rep, and part of the dream, or part of the desire of sales is like, oh, I can make a lot of money and all that kind of stuff, to pivot to go, well, but if I go home every day and I'm miserable and I hate, that doesn't make any sense either. So that's to your, question. I think that was a really good time that said, hey, let me quit this direction, and go down a different path as far as what I want to do.
So when you're, counseling, because at this point, I think, and I know you well enough. I mean, we've spent years, at least working together, and I've seen your team grow, right? That's not an easy thing to do. I mean, you have more than doubled the size of your team, in the years that we've known each other. Right. From a little over 100 to, you're over 300 or something like that. And, when you're building this network, this community inside of, and you're at Southwest Airlines right now, when you're doing that, how are you helping each of those individuals? You talk about thinking about 2 roles ahead. What are you thinking about? If they're thinking about 2 roles ahead, how are you, because you can't build a team about what ifs.
Right.
How are you managing in that conversation to stay grounded on what the business needs to run while delivering on hopefully that plan, that promise,
right,
of 2 roles ahead?
Yeah, I think one of the things that has to shift a little bit, right, is we've always thought of, career growth as this, stair steps, right, where you're just boom, and it's just this logical thing. And I think as you begin to think a little bit more of it as a lattice and a little bit more, and especially in the recruiting space, if you will, I've just challenged a lot of folks to think of it less as a career and more as a craft. And if you're a crafts person who you have many things that you dabble in, if not really really well, you want to get better, right? And so just you want to be the best at what you are doing, right? And so I think that's kind of one of the challenges. I think obviously there's a timing of it. One of the things that I share with them is my own journey at the company, and so I'm now the head of TA, super excited. Just gotten to do a lot of great things. But when I was a recruiter, the first 7 jobs for the next step, team leader, supervisor, whatever you called for, I didn't get. Interviewed 7 times over a however many year period, and for a variety of different reasons. A lot of times didn't get good feedback or valuable feedback, if any feedback. That's just where I would process of like, the heck with it or whatever. And that's where I think the maturation began to come to go, okay, let me look in the mirror. Let's see what the things that can do, but also just believing in, okay, well, maybe the timing's not right or whatever. And now I look at where I am and look at, had I quit at any one of those points in time, I don't know where I would be. Wouldn't be, in my 24th year at Southwest getting to do something really, really cool. So that would be off the table. But also I look at some of them and go, man, I'm glad I didn't get that one, right? Like it's that unanswered prayer type of thing that's like, okay, had I gotten that one at that timing, I could have ended up how that person ended up perhaps, or, just in a different path. And so I think that's really important. I try to educate the folks on that, mostly just from just give some things time, right? Like I get it, but it's look at your career a little bit more like a marathon than a sprint, if you will, and that there's a pace to that. And the cool thing is that when I started getting promoted, some of those came really, really fast on top of each other. And so, yeah, that can happen, right? And so you go for 5 or 6 years with nothing, and then all of a sudden it's an accelerated piece, and you still kind of end up at the same spot.
Yeah, and I think that just, especially where we're at Southwest in particular, just the growth of that organization.
Right.
But that, I think that speaks to opportunity, right? And to your point, of a sprint versus a marathon, right? And I've learned that too. In fact, I'm at a point now where I don't want another role.
Yeah.
I'm happy just where I'm at. And I'm sure you have people in your organization that are just like, I just want to do this. I don't want to get promoted. I'm super happy right where I'm at. And I'm satisfied with the life that this affords me. How do you, when you get into that sprint conversation, you get a really eager young professional who has the ambition, has the knowledge, maybe the organization isn't moving at the same pace. What's the advice to those? Because there's a lot of that. And I think in part, it is the environment that we've created, especially with social media, this sort of instant gratification, the dopamine rush on doom scrolling, as it may be. Like we are training an entire generation of young people that things will come fast if you just scroll long enough.
Right.
How has that changed your leadership style, knowing that is in the ethos? It's what they're thinking about.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think a piece of it where you have to shift them a little bit is, okay, yes, I play a part, as every leader I think should, in people that they lead's career, right? Like there is an element that I play, but I'm not the only actor in the play. You're actually the star, which means you need to be the one that's creating things, right? Like I don't need, I can provide you with information that would help you become better or learn more about what's happening in the market or space. You also can go do that, right? And so what if you want to move at that right pace, are you doing it? The other thing that folks, when my folks on my team, like, how did you get into that? I said yes to a lot of things and then figured it out afterwards, right? And I use our own, the plane's going to push back at a certain time. You're either on it or off it. You don't get to sit there in the lobby area of the gate and, well, do I want to get on or not or whatever. And so I've had a lot of conversations with folks that, like, yeah, I don't know if that's the right thing for me, or I don't really want to do that. And I go, probably my worst on paper assignment that I had is the one that I learned the most from, and that accelerated my growth. And had I not, I don't know that I would be here. But also, it's like, yeah, if you're waiting for that perfect time for all these things, then that's probably not going to happen either. And so it's, you take it and then figure out how to get it done, figure out how to create capacity. I think that's one of the really big things, Cliff, that holds people back is their ability to create capacity for themselves, right? Like, my plate's so full, I don't know how to do that. And it's like, well, you're gonna be stuck where you are, because you've got to be able to kind of create capacity so that you are available for when that opportunity comes. So that's a really big piece of it. And what I found that there's a lot of work to be done there. So when you kind of get them to go, hey, Cliff, what I need you to do first is create capacity so that when I have something, you can do it and you can do it well. Well, then that they go and work on that for a while, and a lot of them will learn. Sometimes it can be harder than what you think, right? And so I think that's one way that you can certainly help folks that are newer in their career to understand that.
I like the plate analogy, because I think you have a couple of choices. If you can't change the size of the plate, you have to take stuff off of it.
Right.
And then and it comes down to, I think, and I'd love to hear you talk about this a little bit, it's what do you value, right? Because there are some things that are just necessary in life, right? You're going to eat, sleep, drink, right? If you've got a family, you're going to, most people put their family first. So those are things from a value that don't ever get removed from the plate. The rest is optional. And I don't think a lot of young people understand how to create their own value system and value proposition, which is natural, right? As we grow, we learn. You and I at this point probably value a lot of the same things, which is, we value time more than anything.
Exactly.
And probably time with family and doing things that are going to bring us the experience that we want. It's okay when you're younger. And I think people are forgetting this, from a value perspective. You should take on a lot. That plate should be so overflowing that you put yourself in a position where someone like Greg comes and says, I'm going to have something, I've got an opportunity, I need to know that you're going to be able to take it on. And now I've got to make a value decision of what on that plate do I really value. Do you have the value conversation with your young professionals?
Yeah, and I think it's, I do, and it was funny because I was talking to a couple of the students afterwards, and congratulating them, and just talking a little bit about what we do and value, and one of them I was talking about, being able to understand what you want in life, right, and the types of roles, and this role, over here you might not make as much money or might not have as much prestige, but you're home every night and you can coach your kid's soccer team or whatever. If that's a higher value, then that's okay, right? But I think a lot of times trying to figure out what you want to do and where you want to be is that. I think that capacity, it's like a muscle, right? If you're trying to build muscle, you can't just lift the same weight over and over again, you typically you add weight to it. You add more and more to your plate, if you will, to see what is my capacity level. What is my capacity level to be able to handle things at work and balance what else is important to me, right? So I think that's really important. I think the other thing that I try to talk to them about is delegating or giving something to someone else, and that gets a bad framework at times because it's not about dumping things that you don't like doing, but I am a big believer that a lot of times, in order for you to get really great things, you have to give up really good things. And I think as you look at that plate and go, okay, I need to, in order for me to have more capacity, I have to give this, it's not going to not get done. I'm just going to give it to somebody else. Well, guess what? That creates an opportunity for them. And Cliff, I swear, there's 3 or 4 really big times where I've done that, and it was hard because it was something I created. It was like my baby, right? I'm like, oh my God, no one else could do this. Well, here's what happened. Not only could someone else do it, they could do it better, and they made it better, but at the same time, I got something bigger and better, right? And so I think that's, you've got to be able to do that, and you've got to be able to, you've got to be willing to do that. And I think that's a struggle.
It is. And now you're talking about ego, right? And that is the biggest thing. And I remember my ego was enormous when I was younger. And I think that's a necessary survival tool for a lot of things because it allows you to take on maybe more than you should. But you do get to a point in your life where ego becomes a barrier. And you have to just, it's not suppress it. You have to, I think, put it in the right context of where you are and what do you really want. So I know for me, what works for me is I am so much happier today when I shed a layer of something.
Yeah.
And the less layers I have, the more simpler of a person I am, the happier I've become. Now, that would not have been me at 20 years old, and that's okay. I think you have to go through that. But I think that's a little bit what you're talking about when you're talking about that delegation piece. Like, I am, when I work with my team, I delegate a lot, and I don't micromanage. I really do trust the team because here's what I know. There's nothing that we do that is so life-threatening. Now, being in the airline business, you want to have the best pilots, right? You want to have the best, flight staff. You want to have good mechanics. So not always the same thing, but just generally in life, most people aren't in a position where every decision is someone else's life is in your hands. And in those moments, you can let go of your ego a little bit and go, maybe that person maybe they won't do it as great as me. At least that's what I'm thinking.
Right.
But to your point, if you let the ego go a little bit, you have the opportunity to allow something more interesting potentially to take its place. And this is the biggest problem that I think a lot of people have. And I think you say it so beautifully. It is the opportunity to recognize opportunity.
Yeah.
And you have to create that.
No, I think 100%. And I think a piece of that too is you get into, control what you can control, right? I think so many of us can get bogged down with the pieces of something that's out of our control. And I'm like, you're spending more time on that than on the part that you can control. Like, do the part that you can, and we'll figure out the other, or maybe we won't, or whatever it is. But that worry piece of it's not there. And yeah, to your point, it is just so much more fun for me now to talk about what my team is doing and some of the amazing, incredible things, and them getting the credit or whatever. Well, guess what? That's why we're doing things in leaps and bounds, because they're doing it. Greg's not doing it and taking a step forward, 2 back, and all those kind of things. We're moving at an exponential pace, and I think that's just where you get into at some point in time, you have to be able to make the decision, I think, or the realization that the name on the front of the jersey is more important than the one on the back, right? And I, to me, it's, do you want to be the highest paid player or the most recognized person on a team that's horrible, that sucks and never wins? Or do you want to be part of a team that you're playing in the championship every year or more frequently? Which is more important to you? And I think that's a big part of the decision, process as well, is being able to do that. And then I think younger in your career, there is a point in time where I think the focus becomes really important, right? Because at 20 and 25, lots of distractions, easy, shiny stuff, noise everywhere, and it's very easy to get caught up into that. I mean, I think, one of my biggest issues was just, looking at friends and other people, what they had and what they were doing, and wanting to try to keep up with that versus being maybe truer to myself and understanding myself better and focused on that.
And would that be your advice, as we sort of wrap this great conversation up? If you're meeting, a young professional coming into whatever profession at this point, is that the advice? It is, create and value yourself first, learn from others around, create capacity.
Yeah.
What are you telling them?
Yeah, no, first of all, you have to be your own advocate, right? Like, you can't count or expect someone else to do that for you. You'll get help, you'll get mentors, all of those things are great, but it will still take the action from you to be able to do. So I think that part's really, really huge. And then, we've talked a lot about this, in our time here together as a group, of not being afraid to fail, right? Because I think so many of us get hung up on that then you don't try. And then that's really the defeat. The fail is not the problem. It's I didn't try, or I failed and then I quit, versus learning from the fall and trying not to fall again or to go a little bit further, that type of thing. And so that's what I would tell them. And then frankly, find your own path. Like, find the path that's right for you. Don't listen to all that outside noise, because at the end of the day, you want to be happy. You want to be able to look back, and it's just, as you and I have talked many times, I mean, enjoying and having joy doing what you do and who you do it with is huge. And a lot of times we don't learn that until it's a little late, right? And those kind of things.
Yep. I think that's great advice. Greg, thanks for sharing your story.
Thanks, Cliff.